bring me a songbook? I think, I'm not sure if it's in here, because this is thinner. Yeah, there's two versions.
The orange platform?
Yeah, because there's a song that I wanted to read today, written by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati.
Huh?
Dushta Mana. Kisha Trumi Vaishnav. Yeah, it's here. 385. 385.
Oh, it's also.
385. Okay. You started?
Yes.
Jai Saparikar Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shri Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Radha Govinda Jiyo Ki Jai Jai Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sudarshan Chakra Jiyo Ki Jai Jai Shri Giriraj Govardhan Ki Jai Jai Shri Shri Nitai Gauranga Ki Jai Jai Shri Nrsinga Bhagavan Ki Jai Jai Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Astotar Sata Shri Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Astotar Sata Shri Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Nityalila Pravishto Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Shri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Nityalila Pravishto Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Shri Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshava Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Shri Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Mahabhagavat Srila Gaurkishore Das Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Shri Srila Sachidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai Vaishnava Sarvabhaum Shri Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai Jai Shri Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath Shata Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai Srila Sarup Damodar Roy Ramanandadi Gaur Parsada Vrinda Ki Jai Nam Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sikaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopi Go Govardhan Dvadashavanatmaka Shri Braj Mandala Dham Ki Jai Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Yamuna Ganga Tulsi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Shri Giriraj Govardhana Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Jai Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sudarshan Chakra Jiyo Ki Jai Jai Bhakti Vigna Vinashana Shri Nrsinga Bhagavan Ki Jai Bhakta Prabhu Shri Prahlad Maharaj Ki Jai Charadam Charu Sampradaya Charu Acharya Ki Jai Akaramat Shri Chaitanya Mat Ki Jai Orananya Shakamak Samuha Ki Jai Shri Vishva Vaishnava Raj Sabha Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Tribhuvana Pavana Harinam Sankirtana Ki Jai Tribhuvana Mangala Harinam Prabhu Ki Jai Hare Krishna Maha Mantra Ki Jai Sachinandana Gaura Hari Ki Jai Shri Nityananda Mahajana Ki Jai Shri Panchatattva Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jataha Padakamalam Shri Guru Navaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahabhajanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gaura Chise Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vrindai Tulsi Dembai Priyai Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. First of all, I'm offering my unlimited Dandavat Pranams, my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Gurudev, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Sto Tarsata Shri Srila, A.C. Bhakti Vedanta, Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada. And then I'm offering my same unlimited Dandavat Pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Siksha Gurudevs, Nitya Lila Pravishta, Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Shri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj, and Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Shri Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And also my Dandavat Pranams to all of my Shri Shri Rupanuga Guru Varga, and my Dandavat Pranams to all the Vaishnavas and all the Vaishnavas. So yesterday was a very auspicious day, powerful day of the Tirubhav Mahamahotsav Titi of Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And we had a very nice day hearing about him, discussing his glories. I wanted to, actually last night I read the whole entire rest of the biography after the class. Mainly speaking about all of his preaching, year by year by year, where he preached, for how many days, what, so many dignitaries, scholars, various personalities, even Western persons came to see Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He became very renowned, of course, by his qualities, his character, his learning, everything about him was astonishing. So, and it also described in the biography about how on the morning of his final day before departing into Samadhi, he called for Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj to sing Sri Rupa Manjari Pada. And then also it was written there, I believe it was probably taken from Srila Bhakti Pramod Puri Goswami Maharaj, that they included at the end of this biography. I could tell by the style of the writing that Srila Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj actually wrote an entire book. I mean, he wrote articles and essays and it became compiled in a book. We have it in English. It's called Of Love and Separation. Green-colored cover. Yeah, and it's all of his various like Vyasa Puja offerings and glorifications on the disappearance days that he gave over decades, a period of decades, for his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. I also remember when I was reading that years ago that the final instructions of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he very carefully presented. And he even presented in one of his offerings Bengali poetry that he put, what he did was he converted the statements of Srila Prabhupada into Bengali rhyming poetry. Payar, like two lines, like in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And so I was reading that. It's not very long, but very interesting. There is one song written by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. It's actually included in our most updated version of this Gaudiya Giti Gucha. And I remember years ago that song, this very song is called Vaishnava K. Vaishnava K. That means in Bengali, who is a Vaishnava? Vaishnav K. Who is a Vaishnava? So, it's a very important song. Srila Param Gurudev, Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj, he wrote an article for their publications when he was here on the earth. And he, it was actually for, I think it was the disappearance day, also, Tirobhav of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And he decided that he would include this song with some explanations. You can find it in the Rays of the Harmonist magazine. You know? So, I think that this song is very worthy of us contemplating and becoming familiarized with. It's a very in-depth, basically Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada is telling that our dushtamana, that means our wicked mind, is always trying to fool us. Yes. Kisher tumi Vaishnava. He says, oh dushtamana, kisher tumi Vaishnava. Tumi kisher Vaishnava. What kind of Vaishnava are you, oh my mind? So, we're going to hear about this. Actually, I need a light. The light up here. Because when I read from papers, the lighting is not good enough for my eyes. unless it's an illuminated screen. Yeah, okay. So, is that good? We read this song? Jai. We're going to learn a lot about how there is so much kapatya and kutinati, as Srila Raghunath Das Goswami has pointed out in the Manasiksha. But Srila Prabhupada is writing this song for all of his disciples and followers, and for all Vaishnavas in general, that they should carefully consider what is real Vaishnavism and how our wicked mind will trick us into having pride and so many other bad qualities that are not the qualities of Vaishnavas. So we will discuss this poem. It has, let me see how many verses.
18.
Huh?
18.
18. 18 verses. Okay. Dushtamana Tumi Kisher Vaishnava. So this is also to be sung. It's written as a song. It can also be sung. But I'm only just reading it. Pratishtara tare nirjanera ghare tava harinam kevala koitava. So, translation is, O wicked mind, dushtaman, dushta, wicked. Tumi kishera Vaishnava. What kind of a Vaishnava are you? Pratishtar thare nirjanera ghare tava harinama kevala koitava. Your chanting, which you perform in a solitary place, for the sake of prestige, it is solely pretense. There it is. You know that this was a very major very major instruction of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that he did not like for his disciples to do what is called Nirjan Bhajan. You know what that is? Solitary, by oneself. There's a story actually told. In fact, it's also mentioned in a couple of situations, Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj. He tells the story that probably around in the late 1920s or thereabouts, he was in charge of a temple that they were starting in New Delhi, right, of the Gaudiya Math there. And he had a god brother who actually we all know very well nowadays, because later on, he was a brahmachari at that time, but later on he became a Kinchana Krishna Das Babaji Maharaj, exalted pure Vaishnava, right? But his tendency was very much towards going into a solitary place, right, and doing his Harinam Bhajan. Now, can you say why Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was not approving of this before I tell the story? What was it about this Nirjan Bhajan that he was not approving of? Certainly he was approving of doing Harinam Kirtan continually, non-stop. But yet if some disciple, because you know, we're talking about Bengal, and we're talking about a culture quite different from what is there in the modern day, right? And there was this tendency that I'm going to go off alone into the forest and I'm going to perform Harinam Bhajan. Why was it not to the liking of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur?
Harinam Bhajan to purify the souls around you and slowly chanting.
Oh, I forgot the microphone. Yeah.
I mean, from my understanding is bhajans and kirtan, Sankirtan is to purify the souls around you, whoever hears it. And solidarity is just to purify yourself. So
Yeah, that's kind of part of it. That's part of it. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he had a mission. His mission was a preaching mission, right? Not a solitary bhajan mission. He was so energetically engaging all of his disciples in Sankirtan. You see? Just like our Srila Prabhupada also, he had a mission to establish for the whole world the Sankirtan movement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. If his disciples would have said, well, I'm going to go and chant alone. Of course, they didn't have that tendency back then because, they were very attracted to living together in an ashram and so forth. So that tendency hadn't come about so much. But in India, there was such a tendency. Because he wanted that his disciples would be fully engaged in serving the preaching mission. But if they go off on their own, then you can say, well, but Rupa and Sanatan Goswami and Raghunath Das Goswami and so many of our acharyas, they did this kind of bhajan, right? Is that true or not? Did they also do Nirjan bhajan?
They wrote for the benefit of conditions.
That's true. They wrote books. They were not only alone, but nevertheless they were quite often doing bhajan alone. We know from going on Braj Mandala Prikrama, Rupa Goswami stayed alone at Terakadamba. Sanatan Goswami was nearby at Pavan Sarovara. They would sometimes meet like this. Raghunath Das Goswami was alone at Sri Radha Kunda on the banks. So how do we properly understand why is there this disapproving of doing that by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur? Why? Partly. What's the main reason? Not qualified. Here, he's pointing this out. That you wicked mind, you think that you're going to go and you know what that means? Kaitava means cheating. Kaitav. Cheating. Because why? Actually, what's your real motive? Pratishtara tare. Pratishta means desiring prestige. Pratishta. Pratishtara tare. For the sake. You're performing for the sake of prestige. So it is only pretense. And there were so many cases, even during the time of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. Various individuals came, made their bhajan kutir nearby, tried to imitate, chanting so many rounds. So this song here by Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada is giving us the correct and the the correct way of applying the process of Shuddha Bhakti without pretense, because as it is told in the Manasiksha, that Pratishtasha, desire for Pratishta, is compared to what?
Like a
Pratishtasha drishta swapacha ramani me hridinatet. Even Raghunath Das Goswami is saying this. This desire for Pratishta is like a swapacha. The most difficult is the desire for Pratishta. Because this desire for Pratishta, prestige, and it means to dominate over others. And it's quite the opposite of what? The mood that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has told in Sikshastakam needs to be developed in order to chant the pure name of Krishna constantly. What is that mood? Trinadapi Sunich. Trinadapi Sunichena, the third verse. You know that verse? Trinadapi Sunichena, Tororapi Sahishnuna, Amanina Manadena, Kirtaniya Sada Hari. What's the translation? Mike.
Only one who is more humble than a blade of grass, tolerant than a tree, doesn't expect honor from anyone,
Yes.
gives all due respects to others, is qualified to perpetually chant the holy names of Sri Hari.
Yeah. Trinad api sunichena. Lower. Sunicha, nicha, sunicha means very low. Sunichena. Trinad api sunichena. Lower, one who considers himself lower than a blade of grass. Why is this analogy being given of a blade of grass?
Because when a blade of grass gets stepped on, it just allows itself to be stepped on. It doesn't fight back.
That's right, it doesn't pop back up, it just stays, right? And a blade of grass, that's what happens to grass. They're stepped on. They don't retaliate, they don't retaliate. Oh, this is my position. But, the lower than a blade of grass is showing how that mood of feeling oneself very, very fallen, it is actually the only qualification for chanting Shuddha Nam. There is no way around that. Then comes the second quality. Todor api sahishnuna. Why is he comparing the tolerance of a tree?
Because a tree, we take its fruits, we take its shade, even in the scorching heat, and the tree never asks for a single thing in return. It just keeps giving.
Does it complain? Does the tree complain about anything? If somebody comes, cuts off his branches? No. All these different qualities. Tolerance. Whether it's snowing, lightning, extreme rain, no water. The tree never complains, just tolerates. Our wicked mind would like to bypass this necessary qualification to chant the holy names, but not possible. Because everything has to be purified and revealed. So that's why Raghunath Das Goswami is telling in his Manasiksha that all these different desires of material enjoyment and the different tendencies toward kapatya and kutinati, that means hypocrisy, and nishkapatya, to become free from any deceitfulness. And actually what this means is that one is not hiding anything. the heart becomes saralata. Saralata means simplicity, very simple. There's no, the opposite of simplicity is what? Duplicity. That's the opposite. So, actually, all of this character will have to be developed. And so this song is so important that our great Acharya has written this song. Now we're going to read through it and hear about how he is revealing in this song the pitfalls of following the mind. Yes, and also the necessity of having completely pure motivations. So he begins with that you think that by your doing this nirjan bhajan, unsolitary, that now you will get so much prestige from this. And people will say, oh, just see, he's doing this solitary bhajan so intensively, all by himself, chanting constantly from morning till evening. But what is Prabhupada saying? Tava Harinam Kevala Koitava. Your Harinam is only cheating. It is only pretense. Now, the story I was going to tell. Srila Sridhar Maharaj said that his godbrother, who, I forget his brahmachari name, but later he became Srila Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj. And he was going in this jungle area, Bali Hati was called, Bali Hati, some distance from Delhi, and doing his solitary bhajan. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj wrote a letter to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada, and he informed him that your disciple, such and such, he was in this jungle doing Harinam, but I've brought him back to the Mat. I have brought him back, and now I've engaged him here in helping with the preaching. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati wrote back and he says, you have done the work of a great friend to him. By bringing him back and engaging him in the preaching mission, you have done the work of a true friend to him. Then he said, I do not approve of doing Nirjan Bhajan in the jungles of Bali Hati. So Srila Sridhar told us, even though he was quite, pure Vaishnava, but it was not what Guru wanted. Guru wanted him to be engaged just as all the other disciples. He was not approving of that. And later on, Kinchana Krishnadas Babaji, when he took Babaji Vesh, he's so exalted, pure devotee. He was practically the Kirtan Acharya of the Gaudiya Math. We have many recordings of his incredibly beautiful singing, but he was constantly doing kirtan. Practically no one ever saw him sleeping. He was always up sitting, chanting, or even eating. Very rare. I met him in Mayapur, but especially when my Guru Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada, departed on that very evening, Kinchana Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj was there. He was there. He was there when Prabhupada took sannyas, doing kirtan. He used to be there at Srila Sridhar Maharaj's mat. He was kind of like an avaduta, that he would just go here, there, and even though there was some tension after the disappearance of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and there was some division of the Gaudiya Math, but he paid no attention. He would just go here, there, and everywhere. Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he used to even go to the birthplace of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, not far from Navadvip Dham. And when Srila Sridhar Maharaj found out, he said, why you are doing like this? Going to my birthplace. He says, yes, I'm going to your birthplace. and I'm taking the dust from there on my head, because I consider the poetry that you have written and the power of all of these poems is like the poetry of Rupa Goswami. He told that. Even though you're my god brother, but I consider you like that. That's why I'm going to your birthplace and worshipping you. So, anyway, on that evening when Srila Prabhupada departed, he was sitting there. It's in the video also, you can see. And he was facing the Vyasa-san, because the whole night, November 14th, 1977, for the whole evening, until the early break of dawn, all the disciples stayed in the temple room of Srila Prabhupada's transcendental form on the palanquin on the Vyasa-san, and his puja was performed. In fact, that's the first time that I saw our beloved Srila Gurudev, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj, when we brought Prabhupada from his room, circumambulating the temple, then placing his palanquin in front of the 3 altars, placing him on the Vyasa-san, and then Sri Guru Charana Padma was sung. And the person who was singing it was Srila Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And when I heard that hymn singing, I became very moved. I didn't know who he was, and then I asked one of my godbrothers, I think I asked Bhagwat, who is now Bhagwat Maharaj, because he was there. I said, who is that sannyasi singing? He says, oh, that's our Bhaktivedanta Narayan Maharaj from Mathura. So, oh, that's Narayan Maharaj. So that was my first encounter through hearing, and I was very impressed. So Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj was also there, and sitting. The whole temple room was completely full of all the disciples, all the way through the night. But Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj was sitting, and it was cold that evening. It was the middle of November, quite cold, and he was sitting in his Babaji Vesh with I don't even know if he had a t-shirt or a kurta on, but just very thin cloth, thin Babaji Vesh, only up to the knees, right? Like a chadar, the thin cloth. So I was sitting there, and I had a sweater and what we call bugle bandi. Remember what those were? Yeah, they goes across like this. And I had a Prabhupada hat, a Swami hat, and I had even a woolen chadar. A woolen chadar, very warm, lal imli, wool chadar. So I thought, oh my God, I should give him my chadar, because it's getting quite bitter cold in the evening, So then I was sitting behind him, actually. I was sitting just behind him. We were all seated on the floor, And so then I kind of tapped his shoulder, and he turned around, and I had my chadar, I offered it to him. And he went, and he turned back around. So then Bhagwat came up to me. He saw what had just happened. He says, don't ask Babaji Maharaj, just put it on him. So that's what I did. I just draped it around his shoulders, and then he accepted it. And like that, it sat there the whole night without moving, right? Till the early break of dawn, which is the coldest time of the night, like 6 o'clock in the morning, coldest time. And then everyone stood up, because Srila Prabhupada's palanquin, he was going to be carried now by us on a parikrama of all the main temples of Vrindavan, because the Brijbasi residents had requested one last darshan of Srila Prabhupada. So for a couple of hours, we were going in kirtan. Krishnadas Babaji was there, Gurudev was there, and then finally we came back to the site of his samadhi, and the samadhi ceremony was performed there. So, but Krishnadas Babaji, he just took off that shutter and gave it back to me at the coldest time in the morning. I kept that shutter as a sacred item, but a couple of years later, in 1979, I flew back from India to America. Jai Jai Shri Shri Radha Govinda. On Pan Am Airlines, remember that one? That airlines? They changed, but in those days, their luggage was not very, their system. There's so many pieces of luggage could be lost. And that was lost in my luggage, so I didn't have that shutter. But at any rate, the thing is that his whole life he was absorbed in Harinam. But still, in that earlier stage, Srila Prabhupada did not want him, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati did not want him to do that Nirjan Bhajan. So this is the first verse. The second verse, he says, he's again talking about this desire for pratishta, the desire for prestige and acclaim and that. So he says, Jadera pratishta, Shukarera bishta, Jano na kitaha mayara vaibhav, Kanaka kamani, divasa jamani, Babia kikaj anitya se sab. So this has got a lot in this one verse. He's saying worldly fame is the excrement of hogs. And it's called Shukarera Bishta. Jadera Pratishta. Jader means worldly Pratishta. It is compared to the stool of hogs. Oh, do you not know that it is the wealth of Maya? So now he's talking to his mind. Oh mind, Jano na kitaha mayara vaibhav. Mayara vaibhav. It means this pratishta, this desire, it is the trick of Maya. It is the vaibhav, the wealth of Maya that she's exhibiting. Then he says, what is the use of fixating day and night on wealth and women, kanaka and kamani, divasa jamani, that means day and night. Babia kikaj anitya sesa. What is the use of fixating day and night on wealth and women when all these are temporary? What is the use? I was just hearing Prabhupada today on the tape, making this exact same point. How everything is temporary. Very essential for Vaishnavas to understand the true nature of the material world and all of the desires that are connected with the material world, because it's all temporary. And not only will it be taken away, for sure, but we don't even know when. At any single moment, it can be taken away, correct? Anything. But that is the trick of Maya. Trick of Maya. He's going on now. Tomara kanaka, bogera janaka, kanakera dvari, seva homadhava. Kamanir kama, nahe tava dhama. Tahara mallika, kevala yadava. Pratishdasha taru, jaramaya maru, napelo ravana, jujya raghava. So he's saying, who's he talking to? Yes. Your wealth is a source of sense enjoyment. Use it to serve Madhava, the husband of Lakshmi Devi. Kanakera dvare sevaho madhava. This tomara kanaka. Kanaka means wealth. Bogera janaka. It is actually the source of bhog, of enjoyment. Your wealth. It is the source of enjoyment. So he says, use it to serve Madhava. Who is Madhava? Madhava is the husband of Lakshmi Devi. Who is Lakshmi Devi? The goddess of fortune. That's what wealth is for. Wealth is only for serving the husband of the goddess of fortune. Then he says, fulfilling the desires of women, it is not your domain. Oh, this is a good one. It is a really good one. Kamanir kam, nahe tava dham. You know what that means? Nahe tava dham. It means it's not your area. It's not your dham. It's not your...
Field of activity.
Yeah, like that. It's not your domain, he's using. That's not your domain. Kamanir kam nahi tavadam. To try to fulfill the desires of women is not your domain. Why? Because those women, they have their real master, who is who? Their only master, their sole master is Sri Yadava. Yadava is Krishna. Madhava is Krishna. So, Tahara Mallika Kevala Yadava. It's not your domain. Because they are not your servants. They're meant to serve who? Yadava, Krishna. But you, the wicked mind, you're thinking, oh, that's my area to enjoy. But that's not really the truth. That is not the truth. The conditioned souls think, oh yes, I'm going to embark upon a very great adventure in completely satisfying my senses and all of my lust. But actually, no, that's not your domain. This is the reality here. He's actually pointing out the true reality, O mind. So, not you, wicked mind. You cannot satisfy them. Only he can. Because it's not your domain. Not your domain. Now, Pratishdasha Taru Jara Maya Maru. Jara Maya means materialistic illusion, right? The tree, the taru means tree, the tree of the desire for prestige, he's calling that the Pratishdasha Taru. Pratishta Asha Taru. The tree of the desire for prestige. It is what? It is like a mirage in the desert. Jara Maya Maru. Right? And then he says, Ravana, the famous, powerful Asura, Ravana, in the desert, that Ravana, he was unable to attain by fighting Sri Raghava. What did he want to attain? What did Ravana want to attain?
Sita, right?
That's right. The goddess of fortune. He wanted to completely enjoy the goddess of fortune for himself. But did he succeed? No. Because he was unable to attain by his fighting Sri Raghava. Raghava is Lord Ram. Ramachandra is also called Raghupati Raghava Raja Ram. Yes? Raghupati of the Raghu dynasty. So here Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has dismantled so many misconceptions of the mind by pointing out what really is the reality, what really is the truth. It is not true that you can try to enjoy what is not your domain, because you cannot satisfy the desires of the women, and also the women cannot satisfy the desires of the men. This is the illusion. Actually, the only domain is that they belong to who? Madhava, Yadava. Everything belongs to him, is meant for his service. But you, O wicked mind, you're thinking like this. Now he goes on and says, Vaishnavi Pratishta. So here, he's saying, Vaishnavi Pratishta tate karo nishta taha na bajile labhibe rorava. Heard that word before? Rorava?
No.
Yes.
I can't.
Rorava. Not a nice place. So he's saying here, be steadfast in your acceptance of the prestige that comes from being a Vaishnava. That's take karo nishta. Have this nishta in Vaishnavi Pratishta. Vaishnavi Pratishta is different than what he's mentioned in the previous verses as Jada, Jadera Pratishta, ordinary, material, mundane prestige. But he's saying, you should be steadfast in your acceptance of the prestige that comes from being a Vaishnava. Tahana bojile lobibe rorava. If you do not observe this, then you will go to the hellish planet known as Rorava. Harijan dvesha pratishtasha klesha. Envying, dvesh means envy. Harijan dvesha means envying the devotees of Sri Hari. Pratishtasha klesha. This is an affliction arising from your desire for prestige. So, why do you see so much glory in that prestige? Karo keno tabe tahara gaurava. Why? Why? This is only causing more suffering for you. This prestige, this desire for pratishtha. So what he's doing is he's explaining all the different ways in which this desire, deeply rooted in the mind, in the heart, how it will cause so much problems, right? So, why do you see so much glory in that prestige? If you envy the devotees of Sri Hari, oh, this is an affliction arising from your desire for prestige. Is that a good thing? No. Now he says, the fame that follows, the spiritual fame that follows the Vaishnavas is never to be considered a temporary material glory, for it occurs in relationship to Sri Hari and is devoid of the stench of Maya. In it, there is never any mundane duplicity. I'm going to read on now without the Sanskrit rule. Now we're coming to the end of the class time. So he's saying, know that the dog-eating outcast woman of worldly prestige and the snare of solitude, that means the snare being captured by solitary bhajan, these are both illusory hells. I shall give up, he's thinking, quote, I shall give up kirtan and smear myself with worldly honor by performing solitary bhajan. What is the use of seeking such glory? Always know that Madhavendra Puri, he never stole, that is, he never falsely displayed the symptoms of bhav. Your fame is the excrement of hogs. never consider it to be equivalent to his fame. Madhavendra Puri. Under the control of envy, you have drowned yourself in mundane rasa by renouncing the sublime beauty of kirtan. Therefore, O wicked mind, you fraudulently propagate solitary bhajan, which is the useless wealth of a false renunciate. You should meditate upon all that Srimad Mahaprabhu taught with great care to Srila Sanatana Goswami. Never forget the following two instructions. 1. Chant the holy names of Sri Hari in a loud voice. And 2. Never consider Falgu and Yukta Vairagya, the false and appropriate renunciation, to be the same. And never consider Badha and Mukta Jivas, the bound and the liberated souls, to be the same. That person whom wealth, women, and the tigress of prestige have given up is indeed a Vaishnava. Such a person is a detached, pure devotee before whom material existence accepts defeat. Where only those sense objects necessary to maintain the body are accepted, there is no disease or pitfall. What else can be said about such detachment? When free from attachment, one sees all objects of enjoyment in connection with Madhava. This is appropriate renunciation, and great fortune is found there. Indeed, in the material realm, the wealth of Sri Hari is found therein. However, the glory of one who performs kirtan to enhance his reputation is merely fraudulent. Give up both the desire of renouncing worldly objects and craving for mundane pleasure, O mind, for both of these are unbefitting a Vaishnava. Connection of these two propensities with Sri Krishna is the source of transcendence. That connection is never possible for materialists. The hearts of those who accept the philosophy of impersonalism, they are directed away from Sri Krishna. And arrogant about their liberation, they blaspheme the Vaishnavas. Your aspiration for bhakti depends on service to the Vaishnavas. So why have you invited this struggle with solitude? A false renunciate who calls himself an ascetic can never become a Vaishnava. By giving up the lotus feet of Sri Hari and increasing his solitude, the glory of whatever result he obtains is simply a sham. Becoming situated in Radha Dasya, the service of Sri Radha, release yourself from the serpent of material enjoyment. Know that the desire for respect and adoration is not the glory of kirtan. O mind, having given up the association of Sri Radha's eternal servants, why have you adopted the fraudulent practice of solitary bhajan? Just finishing now. The residents of, these are the last two verses. This is very important, these last two verses. I'm reading the Sanskrit. Vaishnavi gan pracharaka dhan pratishta bhikshuk tara nahe sav pran achetar. This is the famous line. Pran achetar se hetu prachar pratishta shahin Krishna gata sabha. The residents of Vraja are the true preachers, and the wealth of the Lord. They are not beggars of worldly fame, who are like corpses. Indeed, because they are infused with life, pran ache jar, they are infused with pran, with life. They propagate the narrations of Sri Krishna everywhere, devoid of any desire for prestige. So he ends his prayer Shri Doyata Das Kirtanete Ash. Kara Uchai Swari Harinam Rava. Kirtan Prabhave Smarana Hoibe. Se Kale Nirjan Bhajana Sambhav. Shri Doyata Das places all his hopes in Kirtan. O mind, chant the names of Sri Hari in a loud voice, because through the potency of Kirtan, the remembrance of the Lord will arise. Only at that time will solitary bhajan be possible. Kirtan prabhave smarana hoibe. Through the power and the prabhav of Kirtan, smarana hoibe. Then one can attain absorption in smaran, which is required for doing solitary bhajan. Then he says, Se kale, at that time when that happens, nirjan bhajan sambhav. It will be possible to do nirjan bhajan. So that is the song. We can meditate upon each one of the verses and go deeper and also reflect where we are at in this regards, right? So that's our class for this evening on the teachings of Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. If you have questions or anything to discuss, we'll do after the artik, okay? And we'll continue for the next few days with various instructions of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Gaur Premanandi. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vancha kalpatarupascha kripa sindhuke patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavi namo namaha. Yeah, this is a song that you have to really like meditate and chant and meditate.
Definitely. Strikes home.
Yeah. Oh, Damdar can lead the kirtan tonight, huh?